you can pick and choose kind of what works for you.
Well, and you don't have to label it.
No, you don't have to label it. People try to get in, you have to be one or the other, and that's just not true. So that's one thing we always try to encourage people to explore, the idea that you don't have to fit into a box with this. Welcome to Normalizing Non-Monogamy, the podcast where we interview incredible people from across the entire spectrum of non-monogamy to hear their fascinating stories. We strive to bring guests on the show who have a healthy approach to non-monogamy. However, it's important to remember that everyone does it a little bit differently, and the views and opinions expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect our own.
Additionally, we produce this show for entertainment purposes only. Please be aware that we aren't doctors or therapists. Consult a medical professional for anything regarding your health that you might learn about on the show. Enjoy!
Welcome to episode 1. We're your hosts, Finn and Emma.
This isn't the original episode 1. This is episode 1 revisited.
It is not, right. It is currently, November 30th, 2019. We have been doing the show for about a year and a half, and
we're about to publish episode 100 in like a week and a half.
We're pretty excited about that. And we thought it was a good opportunity to go back and update this episode.
Yeah, because we know people are continually finding it, and we've gotten better as the time has gone on, and we figured,
or at least we think so.
We have. So the first thing we're going to do is talk a little bit about what is our show about. What is Normalizing Non-Monogamy? Tell them, Emma.
Well, in a really quick way, we interview people in non-monogamous relationships and release at least one interview every week.
That's correct. Well done.
And we strive to be as open and inclusive of every person out there, and that's what we want. We want to represent as many different types of people and relationship styles that are out there.
Also correct. Let's see if that answer's on the board.
And also, this, to be clear, this premise and our goal for this show has not changed. In 100 episodes, we still have the exact same goal as before, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, so for the first, 30 to 40 episodes, we had actually quite a few different other podcasters on. We also pulled in a lot of our friends because in those early days, we didn't have a ton of people reaching out to us. And now we have lots of people reaching out, and it's super exciting. And so you should also reach out, listener.
Yes.
But yeah, so
first off, I want to ask you a question.
Okay.
Why did we start this show?
Because we love hearing people's stories, and we love all of the other podcasts that are in the non-monogamy space, but we would typically find ourselves at this point listening and learning about who the people are, and then we would be ready for the next one. So we're always, I guess, maybe a little ADD and wanting to meet and hear about new people, and that show didn't exist, and so we made it exist. Yeah. And the other piece of that is we really learned the value of helping other people find a voice, hearing people's stories, getting their stories out. And, that helps a couple of ways. One, we've heard that, people find it super valuable to hear other people's stories, right? They can relate in some way, shape, or form, and they know they're not alone. But on the flip side, we've had people tell us that coming on and doing the interviews has been almost like going to therapy, even though we're definitely not therapists.
But it has been life-changing, and for other people, we've been told, as well as ourselves, we have learned so much from all of the guests and all of the interviews that we've done, and we can't wait to keep moving forward with it.
Yeah, so maybe this is a good time to talk about who we are. We just said that we want to hear other people's stories. So who we are, we're Finn and Emma. We've been married a little over 7 years, and we've been exploring non-monogamy, mostly within the realm of swinging, for about
12 years.
12 years but our first time ever doing anything was about 14 years ago. Yep, that's correct.
2007.
2007, that is 12 years ago.
I was I think my math is right.
I don't know why they gave me an engineering degree.
We've been together about 14 years.
That's what I meant to say. So we are in our early 30s at the moment. We're 32. Emma's about to be 33, and
Almost.
She's super excited about it.
Yeah. We also, we don't have any kids, and we lead a pretty nomadic lifestyle at the moment. That has not always been the case, but you'll see as you listen to the episodes, we do tend to travel around a lot. So
yeah, so for the majority of last year and the first half of 2019, we were traveling and backpacking in South America and volunteering while also doing this podcast. So you'll hear chickens and dogs and sheep.
Be patient.
And so we did our best to edit those out. But again, as we've gone on, our sound quality has gotten better. We're always looking for ways to make it better and continue to improve. Another thing that is important to mention here really quick about sound is the little intro you just heard, the little music.
The music.
So that music was the original music we picked for the show. We picked it because it was really hard to find good music, so we picked just goofy,
the most ridiculous one.
And then somewhere in like episode 70-ish, I thought it would be a great idea to get new music. And so we had listeners who were musically inclined create some new music.
We got awesome submissions, but I wasn't quite on board with changing it.
And apparently neither was most of the listener base because we got hate mail.
People agreed with me. They didn't want to change it.
So the music is back. It is our signature clown music, as some people say. Mm-hmm. And we're proud of it. So
the other thing is, if you're a person that binges podcasts, like, please go and binge all of these episodes. But if you're someone who just kind of picks and chooses, that's okay. These are not in any sort of order. You can pick and choose and listen to whatever episodes look interesting to you. There are a couple of episodes where we've had guests come back on and tell more of their story. And in those episodes, we always reference another one to go back and listen to first.
Correct. One last thing before we jump into our story, a little more about our story, and we're going to give you guys a whole deep look into that here in a second. But the last thing we wanted to mention was that we do mention resources at the beginning and end of some of our episodes, most of our episodes. So these resources some of them are affiliates, some of them are not. So some of them we do make some money off of. We've never put anything on the show, and we never will put anything on the show that we don't personally use or personally believe in ourselves. We're not just trying to make money and make a quick buck. We really try to keep a high standard of who we represent on the show because it's our reputation, and we don't want people to buy things or pay for things that are shitty.
Right. You will hear us mention resources. We've tried out a lot of different things along the way. We've changed things up too. You'll notice that, but ultimately they aren't going anywhere. We are going to continue mentioning.
Yeah, we went through a bit of a phase where we mentioned like 3 or 4 at the beginning and 3 or 4 at the end, and we were changing them every week, and it was getting crazy.
Well, then we got out of that.
We did that for like 2 episodes, and it was like, no. So we've toned it down. We keep it classy, and we appreciate your support in using those links to help support us. And with that, what's this episode about, Emma?
So this is about us. This episode here is our story. However, when we originally recorded it, Finn and I just sat down and kind of told our story, and we recently had someone interview us, and we were really happy with how it turned out, and we thought that it was kind of a better style to tell our story because all of our shows are interviews. We thought it would be good to have someone interview us. And so we're putting that here in just a minute. You'll listen to that episode of AJ, who runs the Discomfortable podcast, interview us.
Yeah, we met AJ at the World Domination Summit this past summer.
Yeah, in June 2019.
And yeah, he was gracious enough to let us use this audio, and we want to do that because, again, as Emma said, we were both pretty happy with the way it turned out. And this episode originally aired on his channel in the end of October.
Yep, 2019. And also his show in general is all about shame and dealing with shame throughout your life. So we do talk a little bit about shame and non-monogamy in this episode, and that's just because, well, we thought it was relevant and it's important to his show.
But it's by no means the bulk
Oh, no.
It's a pretty good overview of our story.
Yeah, he asks us a lot of questions about our story.
And with that, how about we go hear the unedited audio as it came straight from his show? And we will...
I was like, he edited it.
Well, he edited it, but we haven't edited his edit.
No.
All right.
And also, go check out the rest of his show because he has amazing work. And he has a really awesome 7-part series about shame. Go check it out. And links will be in the show notes. That's the other really quick thing I wanted to mention.
Oh, we have a website.
We have a website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com. On our website, you can find a page to contact us. There you can leave us a voicemail, send us an email. It also lists all of our episodes on our website, a resources page. On all of our episodes, we have show notes. Those are more detailed show notes than what you'll find in your little podcast
and sometimes
player.
There's even a picture.
And there's oftentimes pictures and or contact information for our guests if they choose to share that. So go check that out.
All right. And we will not talk this much at the beginning of other episodes. We're sorry.
Yeah. No,
but we felt
good.
It was fitting.
We wanted to give this intro a good intro, I guess.
All right. Let's go hear what Finn and Emma have to say to AJ.
Let's go. I know that I have held a lot of shame about it, mostly because it deals with sex, and in society, you're not really supposed to want that, right? You're not supposed to not supposed to talk about sex. You're not supposed to, want variety or whatever, but yet it's still a natural human emotion and need and thing that happen that you do, that you want.
Getting discomfortable with non-monogamy. So I guess my first question is, how did this begin?
Oh boy.
Well, I suppose I'll take this one. Back in 2007, Emma and I were in college and we were studying abroad. It was our second year of college. And we'd been together a little, not even quite a year.
A little over a year.
A little over a year. And we were sort of at a point where neither of us had dated a lot, and we kind of came to the conclusion that we wanted to have some of those experiences, but not only that, we wanted to have those experiences for each other.
Yeah, as in dating other people.
Yep, dating other people. And so I brought up the initial idea, I think, because I wanted her to have those experiences, and at the same time, I did as well, but it wasn't born out of I just want to go and hook up with as many people as I can. That was never really the intent. It was exploring that sort of world of dating, but doing it with a partner. And we've always loved going on adventures together, and this is just sort of one more adventure that we can go on together.
Right. And to give it a little bit more context, Finn and I met when we were in 7th grade, and we were best friends throughout high school. So even though we had only been dating a year, we had a long, many-year history of a friendship. So we had a lot of trust built in our relationship as well, that was there from a lot longer than just a year of dating. So that made it easier to go and try doing these new adventures together.
And do you remember what that first conversation was like? I'd love to zoom in on that. Were you shocked, Emma? Was there a kind of adjustment period? Were there some arguments?
I don't remember being shocked at all. I remember being anxious because it just felt crazy to do. But it wasn't shocking at all. We were on the same page, I think, as far as we just wanted to have fun and go do something adventurous and new. So we also were studying abroad, and we didn't know anybody in the whole country. So we were like, well, why not now? Let's try it. So do you remember me being shocked that you brought it up?
Yeah, I don't know about shocked. I think you were a little what is this? Or we could actually do that? And I think it took a little bit of maybe convincing, but it wasn't, definitely not coercing.
I think it was more discussion around it all.
Yeah, for sure.
So how long have you been together now?
We've been together. I need to do the math.
Well, we've been married for 7 years.
And we've been dating for 14.
14, but there was some points in there where we took a break, in college because of one thing or another working through our relationship. And so since college, we've been pretty much, together.
We have been together, not pretty much.
Pretty much nonstop since about 2010.
So how has it evolved? When you first started and brought this up, I'd love to know what the kind of learning curve was there.
Oh boy.
It's been a learning curve for sure.
Yeah. So throughout college, we were dating. We also, and as Finn mentioned, we split up a few times. So we didn't do that much dating of other people or exploring, just a very little bit. We also went to school in a very remote area, so there weren't a lot of opportunities. However, after college, we moved out to a bigger city and got into exploring non-monogamy quite a bit more. And we definitely learned a lot of lessons. Throughout this whole time, we were dating people together. We never went on separate dates. We wanted to have that whole experience together. And a lot of the lessons were just not being so patient with people. I mean, we were very nice people and we were very patient, and then we'd get ourselves in situations that we didn't want to be in. So we needed to learn to have a little bit of more confidence in getting out of situations when we needed to.
Yeah, I would say that was the bulk of our issues early on. We're not really understanding what, sort of what was acceptable and what wasn't. Or maybe we knew it wasn't acceptable, but it was uncomfortable for us to put the stop to something when, people have expectations. And that's sort of something that we've learned to overcome, that, our safety, and not that we were ever really unsafe. No. Or in a dangerous position.
No,
but
not at all. Just uncomfortable situations.
Uncomfortable, or people were drunk or just being annoying or disrespectful, and we just kind of powered through because we didn't want to be the rude people. And so learning to overcome that was a big thing for us. I mean, it still happens, right? You still get into a situation where everything seems like it's going great, and then it swerves off the tracks, and you're a little blindsided by it. But yeah,
a lot more unusual now, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
So you've gotten better at vetting the kind of people that you would go out with.
Yeah, vetting them, or pulling the plug early, or deflecting if it's clearly neither of us are that interested. I think, something that happens early on for people when they first start exploring this is they're like, oh my God, this is a real thing that we can do. And then the first time you meet somebody as a couple, whether it's another single person or whether it's a couple you're meeting up with, it's sort of this pressure that this is our one and only chance to do this. And so we have to make it happen, because if we don't, this is it. I think both people in the relationship are kind of in disbelief that you're actually doing what you're doing.
Right. So kind of like a beggars can't be choosers thing.
Exactly. And you're like, well, this might be the only time. So let's just do everything that we possibly could in case we never get this opportunity again. And then as you sort of move through it and you realize that we can do this pretty much anytime we want. And there's a relatively large number of people out there who are looking for sort of the same thing. It really does benefit you to take your time and meet the right people and have really good experiences, rather than just forcing it to happen with the first people you meet, because this is it. This is the only time you'll ever get to do it.
Yeah.
And were you mostly going out with couples or with another person, or was it a mix?
It was mostly couples to start with, and it still mostly is couples.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who say, well, it has to be another couple. We're here to meet other couples. We're not here to date separately or find other people like that. And we've sort of evolved to where we're open to whoever or whatever comes along. But at the moment, just time constrictions and what we've been doing with our lives, going off and dating separately it doesn't really make a lot of sense right now. But both of us have that ability. Yeah. If we want.
I think the conversation's always on the table.
Yeah.
So you started always going on dates together, but at some point it evolved where you are at least theoretically allowed to go on dates with other people.
Yeah.
And there have been some unique occasions where one or the other of us was busy or out of town for work or something, or somebody was traveling for work and the other person had an opportunity to do something, and we've entertained that, but it's not ever been something where like we were both home on a Wednesday night and one of us was like, well, I'm going on a date tonight. That just has not happened up to this point, but it's allowed to happen if it does.
Well, and a lot of people with non-monogamy, usually in our experience, I guess, talking to a lot of people, either go on dates as couples or date separately, or people usually fall in one of those two camps, except there's a lot of mixing too. It's kind of confusing, but...
Well, I think to clarify that, I think a lot of times people want to say, we're strictly swingers. We don't get feelings for people. They're looking for just a sexual connection.
Right.
And I guess polyamorous would be the other side?
Yep, and on the other side of the coin are the polyamorous people who almost, you'll hear sometimes a little bit of like condescension, like, oh, well, we don't want to just do that. We want deep connections and relationships. And and so historically, you when you talk to people, there's sort of this perceived notion that these two camps are very separated. But when you actually start digging into it, something you hear a lot from people is, well, yeah, we're swingers, but we're looking for really deep connections we're looking to make really good friends. And we want people that we can hang out with and have a barbecue with and have our kids over for play dates. And, it can either be a sexy time or it can be just a regular old, normal people time. And
normal people.
Not supposed to say the word normal, but anyway, and so you can look at that and say, well, how is that different than if you were in a relationship with these people? And on the other side of the coin, you'll talk to some polyamorous people and they're like, well, yeah, we have relationships, but it's not like I don't just go out and hook up with people. And so to say that the two are, mutually exclusive, I think it's really not true. And there's a lot of overlap and blending and
right. I think people, if you define as non-monogamous or you want to explore non-monogamy, I think the key is figuring out what types of non-monogamy are for you, because there's a wide range and you can pick and choose kind of what works for you.
Well, and you don't have to label it.
No, and you don't have to label it. People try to get in, you have to be one or the other, and that's just not true. So that's one thing we always try to encourage people to explore, the idea that you don't have to fit into a box with this.
And what was that exploration like for you? Do you guys come down on the swinger side or on the polyamorous side, or have you explored both?
Well, yeah, historically it's been more of the swinging side.
However, we started out wanting to meet friends and wanting to find people that we enjoyed hanging out with and going to do things with. And then if there was a sexual connection, that was a bonus. And that's always been what we're interested in. So I think that, that is a little more than your traditional swinging, but it's not quite polyamory because we're not dating people separately. So we're kind of in the middle, I would say.
Yeah, when it'll typically be like we try to find people that we are compatible with on a friendship level. So that way, if it kind of relieves the pressure in terms of like, well, every time we hang out, it has to turn into something sexual. And so we have people that we've met through swinging or met them at a party or met them at a meet and greet or just went out on a date with them. And it has turned into like a 6 or 7 year friendship where we hang out and have cookouts and we'll, spend time with them and their kids or whatever. And we don't have kids and it's not been anything sexual for years and years. And it just sort of evolved out of the sexual realm and into just a really good friendship. And then we have some where it's people that we've met through this that it's never been sexual and it's just been really awesome friends that we can talk about anything with. And then there's some that it started as a friendship and then it's become sexual. So there's just all different variety and we just kind of let it grow and develop into what it is based on like how we're feeling and how they're feeling rather than being like, well, we're here for this, so we have to make this thing happen.
And predominantly, how are you meeting people? Is this internet-based now, or I'm assuming it must be online.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I guess you'd call them dating websites for non-monogamous people. There's some apps out there as well.
Then we also go in person to some meet and greets or some parties, but we find out about those all, of course, on the websites.
Yep.
And what is that like? I mean, you guys must have such a shorthand now where you can kind of communicate to each other. You know, I think this couple or this person is interesting. What do you think? And, you know, I assume that you kind of want to make a decision together. And I wonder what that process is like.
It's been a learning experience.
Well, I will jump in real quick. I know I've talked a lot, but I think this is one of our bigger maybe sticking points is Emma has a very hard time determining based on like reading a profile if she thinks she would be interested in somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I need to meet someone in person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. And as do I, but I have a little bit lower, I don't want to say lower bar, but I have an easier time sort of reading a profile, looking at some pictures and determining, do I want to meet these people in person or am I not that interested? And you could be wrong, right? Like you could pass somebody up based off that. And I guess I'm a little more okay with taking that sort of risk of like, sort of a two-way risk, right? Like I'm okay saying no thank you and maybe we miss somebody that would have been great, or saying, yeah, let's go meet these people, and then it's a weird time with weird people, but you didn't get that from their profile. So I think it's being okay with that sort of low-grade risk that you might miss out on somebody, or you might go and meet somebody for dinner or drinks that you didn't click with, but I guess the barrier of entry is pretty low.
Yeah, and it's been a learning experience for both of us, but particularly for me as far as trying to learn how to make that call, I guess. You know, it helps if we chat with the people a little bit ahead of time, of course, and get to know them a little bit. But for me, I can usually tell if I'm interested in someone as far as, you know, at least a friendship or exploring, you know, meeting that person, but going further than that, as in how attracted I am to them, really, I need to meet someone in person.
Is there a fear of rejection here? You're going on dates, and at some point you have to both talk to each other and then say, you know what, like it's been great meeting you, but we don't want to take it further. And then I assume sometimes that happens to you as well. And there's kind of a feeling of, you know, it's like dating, really.
Yes. And yeah, you described it perfectly. Yes, there's that fear of rejection. And I think that's normal, though. Like you said, it's just like dating. And in the end, I think the best situations are when everyone is an adult about it and is honest about it. And, you know, honest to a point where you don't need to, you know, tell the other person or other couple exactly what you think, but you can be honest as far as, you know, it didn't really click. We're not interested in going further, but you're cool people or whatever. You can roll it out in a way that you would want it to be rolled out to you, I guess. And in the end, you know, yes, it stings, it hurts, but I'd much rather that than get into anything else that's awkward and uncomfortable and not where people want to be.
I think compared to the single dating world, the fear of rejection is a little lower. And I think
that's true.
I was just thinking that there's maybe a couple of reasons for that. One is, you know, at the end of the day, if it doesn't work out with another couple, I still get to go home with my wife or my girlfriend or my partner, right? Or you get to go home with your partner.
Mm-hmm.
And also if they're like, well, we're not interested, you sort of spread that blame across the relationship, right? and you say like, well, I don't know what it was. It was just something about us as a couple, but we both still love each other. So it doesn't really bother me that much. But whereas in the single dating world, if somebody's like, well, I'm not really interested in going further, there's only one person there, and that was you. And so it's like, well, something I did, something I said, something about me. Is it what I look like? Is it how I smell? Like there's just, you just start to internalize that. But I think, and it's interesting as a couple, you're just like, oh, well, they weren't into us, we weren't into them.
Mm-hmm.
And then you move on and like, yeah, sure, there could be like, oh, well, they were super hot, I wish they were into us.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't lay up at night thinking about why another couple wasn't interested in us. But I could definitely see me doing that if I was alone.
Yeah, that's true.
Are there ever situations where one of you wants to move forward and the other doesn't, and there's kind of some argument or resentment that gets built up?
I wouldn't say that either one of us is resentful. I think sometimes we might be a little disappointed, but in the end, our priority is each other. and the happiness like in our relationship. And so if one of us is not comfortable or not wanting to move forward in a situation, the other one, we've always been able to respect that and not have it cause anger or frustration in our relationship.
Well, but it's also been sort of the catalyst for starting to explore being able to do this on our own.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Is that finding that four-way connection is actually, it's really difficult to find four people who, I not only do I have to like the other woman, but I also have to like the other guy because he's going to be spending time with Emma, right? And so you have to like everybody in the dynamic, at least to some degree. And I think that is sort of a really hard thing to find. And so we've had situations where, two of us click really well and we like all people in there and we're like, hey, you know what? You can go and do what you want to do and I'm okay with that. I'll support that. But I'm okay sort of stepping out of this one for now because for one reason or another, one of us doesn't feel like they mesh with the group as well.
Yeah. And that can be a tricky situation to handle, but it all goes back to communication and communication with each other, but also with all four of you or all three of you or however many people that happen to be in that situation and making sure that everyone's okay with where you're at and being honest and upfront, but also respectful and kind. And I think that, a lot of it and all of this non-monogamy in general goes back to communication.
We're sort of dancing around the topic of jealousy. And I wonder for you guys how that first came up, if there has been a lot of jealousy, given that you've been mostly going out together, and how you have managed to deal with that jealousy.
I'd say overall, we have not had a ton of jealousy in our relationship. I think that there has been a few instances where one of us will feel more jealous than the other. Usually that tends to be me. And that's something that when it happens, I try to acknowledge that it is just a normal reaction and it's a normal emotion and it's okay to feel that way. But we discuss it and talk about it and figure out how to improve the situation and work through those feelings. But it has come up in the past, and I'm sure it will moving forward too.
Well, and typically one of the things that we found that causes that is when one or the other of us is doing something with somebody else that we haven't made time to do in our own relationship. And so it's not something that one or the other of us doesn't like to do. And, that's one thing that people get into this for sometimes is they're like, well, I like to do activity A and my partner really doesn't like to do that. And so they've said, go ahead and do that with other people. Right. And that's a totally legitimate reason to do this. But in this case, it's more of we really like doing this thing together and we haven't made time for it in our own relationship. And now we're doing it with somebody else. And so I think that kind of just goes back to making sure, we're taking good care of our relationship before we start bringing other people into it, even if it's just for a night.
Right. And I think that's as we move forward into, potentially separate dating, we'll see how the future goes. But I think that's something that we will always need to remember is to make sure to, foster our relationship and make sure our relationship's in a good place because it obviously, we care about these other people that we're meeting and we want those relationships to be in a good place too. And if ours are not, we don't want something in our relationship to affect other people as well. So it's balancing all of that.
How do you balance the fact that variety is the spice of life and there's just this certain energy that you get around a new person? That kind of, that excited, lusty, doe-eyed glow when you meet a really cute stranger that is difficult to maintain with your partner of 14 years.
Yeah, there's actually, I don't know if you've heard this term, but, and I don't remember where it came from off the top of my head, but there's a term called NRE, which is new relationship energy. And I think it's essentially exactly what you're describing. And it can be hard, right? Like that's definitely where some of the jealousy comes in. And it can be tricky to watch your partner be in that phase.
Mm-hmm.
However, there's been situations where it's happened to both of us. And I think we have an understanding of where when it happens to one of us, the other person realizes, well, that's happened to me, or it will happen to me in the future as well. And so we talk through it and just try to, I guess, work through those feelings. But it is there. And it's definitely, I think it gets back to the piece, as Finn was saying, like fostering our relationship. And if we're in a good place, it makes, even if someone's having those new relationship energy feelings with somebody else, if our relationship's in a good place, then it makes that a lot easier.
Yeah, and I think the other part here that is something that you have to learn early on and that you have to come to accept early on is that we are oftentimes attracted to lots of different types of people. And so if you find yourself attracted to somebody who looks nothing like your partner, it's easy for them to look at that and say, well, if you like that person, how could you be attracted to me? Mm-hmm. And I think if you can realize early on that we have the ability, we're programmed to think many different types of people are attractive, that it's not like, oh, well, she only likes people that look like that person now. Mm-hmm. And she's done liking my flavor now. And so being able to get past that, and really the other piece of this is another sort of non-monogamy vocab word, which is compersion, which has sort of been described as like the opposite of jealousy, where you really you get pleasure from your partner's pleasure. And that's not necessarily a sexual pleasure, but even just seeing them excited about something that they're going through makes you excited for them. And that gives you sort of the energy to like feel good about what they're doing. And I think that's something that takes a while to figure out how to do. Or, you know, there's some people who that's just their natural. They're just like, oh, I'm just so happy to see you happy. And they don't have those sort of jealous tendencies. But
yeah. And for other people, it takes a little longer to get there.
Yeah.
Compersion. I've never heard that word before.
It's one of those, I believe it was Dan Savage.
I'd have to go back and look.
Yeah,
and see
I can't remember exactly where it was born out of. But yeah, it's basically the opposite of jealousy. So it's you derive pleasure from your partner's pleasure or other people's pleasure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that I have thought about in my life is that I often get jealous when my friends hang out without me. But in our culture, that kind of jealousy is just seen as my problem. It's like, yeah, get over it. Your friends are allowed to hang out without you. But in a relationship, I notice that my culture seems to be in the mindset of if you're jealous in your relationship, you're allowed to be upset about it. You're allowed to demand that your partner sort of make changes in order to alleviate your jealousy. And that line seems kind of arbitrary now that I look at it through your lens. I don't know if you've noticed that, a sense of course I'm going to feel jealous, but it has to do with, am I allowed to demand that my jealousy be the most primary emotion in the moment?
Yeah, and so you've touched on something here that we're actually starting to see a lot more of when we interview people or when we talk to people in general, and that is sort of this term that is relationship anarchy. And it typically is more on the polyamorous side, but sort of a high level view of what relationship anarchy is. And please, I'm not an expert on it by any means. And there's actually a relationship anarchy manifesto that we learned about recently, and I haven't gone and read it yet, but the general sort of gist of relationship anarchy is that you allow each of your relationships to sort of operate independently of other relationships you have. And what that sort of looks like is like, if I'm married to Emma, but I have another girlfriend, my relationship with this other woman does not depend at all on my marriage to Emma. And I sort of look at those as two completely separate entities, and I do what I need to do for each of them to keep them each healthy in their own way. And sort of what gets abolished when this happens a lot of times is the hierarchy in a relationship. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes you'll see people are like, well, Emma's my wife, so she's my primary partner, and then there's a secondary partner. And that partner, because they're a secondary partner, gets less of my time. I'm allowed to go see them on Tuesdays and, Sundays or something to that effect. But when people start talking about relationship anarchy, a lot of times those rules kind of go out the window, and it's just, this is my other partner and I do what I need to do to maintain that relationship in a healthy way. And I do what I need to do to maintain my partnership with my wife in a healthy way. And you sort of relax all of those pieces, and you don't impose the rules from one relationship onto the other. And it's not, from what I can understand, it is not a super easy thing to do, but it's the people who sort of practice this feel that it is a much more equitable approach, that you're not imposing your sort of rules or your partner's rules onto other partners.
As long as it's ethical, whatever works for you, I think is important. And so if you're doing something like the relationship anarchy, like Finn just described, that's great. And that you're treating all of your relationships as equal as you can. And that's wonderful to do, but it may not work for everyone. And so that's the key I wanted to describe as well, because when you asked that question, I immediately thought of, well, in relationships, I don't think anyone should dictate what the other person can and cannot do. However, I think it should be a conversation. And if someone is, off with their friends every night of the week and never paying attention to their partner that they're supposed to be with, of course, that needs to be a conversation, and there's some room for jealousy and some course correction there. But I don't think it should ever be where someone is controlling that other person and saying, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, if it's all within, I guess, whatever is reasonable in your relationship.
What you kind of expressed, AJ, was that, like you said, if it's your friend, it's on you to figure it out. But when you're with a partner, all of a sudden it's their responsibility to not make you jealous, almost. And I think what we have to try to do is assume that our partners have our best interest at heart as well, right? And that they're going to make mistakes and they're going to get caught up, but that they're never intentionally trying to hurt you or make you jealous. And if they are, then you probably have a bigger problem to work out.
Yeah.
But that if you can look at this and say, like, well, yeah, it's still kind of on me to work through those feelings of jealousy. It's not necessarily their problem. I think you have to be cautious of your partner's feelings, but at the end of the day, it is sort of on each of us to come to terms with what we're okay watching our partners or our friends do, right? Like, if two of my friends want to go to a movie together and they don't want me there, is it that they really don't want you there? Or did they maybe think you wouldn't be interested in that movie, so they were actually thinking about you, and then we're like, well, he probably doesn't want to come. So it's, again, assuming like your friends and the people that love you have your best interest at heart. And if they don't, then I think that's a different problem, maybe.
Do you guys have rules that you've put in place, and how have those rules been developed or evolved?
Yes. The short answer is yes. We've had rules.
And we still do have
And we
rules.
still do. I think it's very normal. If you go about non-monogamy where you're in a relationship and then you open your relationship up versus somebody who is single and decides to date multiple people and have their own non-monogamous dynamics. It's a little different when you're taking a relationship and opening that up. And when you do that, it's natural to write down or talk about a whole list of rules because that's what makes you most comfortable. That's the, I guess, way to open things up without causing panic for a lot of people.
To still feel like you have some control.
Yeah,
exactly.
I think rules imply safety and control, like you just said. And I think oftentimes as people navigate this, they start to see the rules fall away. And I think a lot of times this kind of goes back to something that I kind of commented on earlier, which is assuming that your partner or partners have your best interest at heart and that they're not going to do things that they think are going to hurt you or they'll be very cautious about doing those. And I think when people first start exploring this, they start to realize that, and they're like, oh, well, I don't need a rule for this. Like, that's how we treat each other.
Mm-hmm.
We did start with more rules than we have now, but we've evolved over time to just be safe and respectful and communicate.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as you do those things, we trust each other to have the other person's best interest in mind. But it took a long time to get there too, like a lot of trial and error with different rules and exploring different things.
Like some examples of rules that you'll hear people start out with that typically fall by the wayside somewhat quickly. So one of them that we hear is like, no kissing. Like, we can do other things with people, but we don't want to kiss other people because that's something that's intimate and we're saving it for ourselves. And then you'll hear people who are like, well, the first time we went out on a date, that rule was gone because they realized that, like, sometimes it can be a little weird to do other things if you're not allowed to kiss somebody, or you're in the middle of something and you like go in and you start to kiss somebody. You're like, oh shit, I'm not supposed to do that. So they have these rules because they think they create safety and security of like, well, I might lose my partner, but I'm not going to lose my partner if they don't kiss the other person.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you start to explore this and realize that I'm not staying with Emma because she doesn't kiss other people, that hasn't been the glue that held our relationship together. And so as people navigate this, a lot of times you see these rules dissolve or morph and change and relax. And ours has been sort of very similar. I think we might have had the no kissing rule for like an hour.
Yeah, I think very early on we might have. Yeah, I can't remember. I'm pretty sure we did, but it was for like an hour. It was very short.
and then there was other rules early on, like when we first started meeting other people, like we decided that, for the first, it was over a year, almost 2 years, we didn't like have full penetrative sex with other people.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was just sort of foreplay or kissing or, fooling around, but we didn't go all the way, so to speak. And so, and that's another very common one is some people never decide to go that far, and that's totally fine. And I think it's just about what people are comfortable with.
And another quick example is a common one too, is that you must stay in the same room or be in the same bed, all of you together.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one that people start to relax on a little bit too as they get more comfortable. Sometimes, depending on the people.
When you meet another couple or another person, is there sort of a negotiation that happens in which you get a sense of, okay, these are their rules, these are our rules, this is what's available, and this is, a no-go zone?
Yes.
Yeah, if you're doing it right.
Right.
That needs to be part of it, yes.
And there's very few things that we would say in this world that there's a right way and a wrong way, but in our opinion, one of the things that you should be doing is negotiating all of these things ahead of time in terms of like, what type of protection are you going to use?
Mm-hmm.
When were you last tested for STIs?
Mm-hmm.
What were the results of those tests? What are things that you're interested in doing? What are things you absolutely won't do?
Yeah, what are your no's?
Or maybe places you don't like to be touched or ways you don't like to be touched because it sets off some sort of trigger for you. And so having these conversations and having them before everybody's, drunk or naked it's really important to do. And it's something that we do with everybody that we go out on a date with. And maybe we don't do it like in the first 5 minutes of meeting them.
Oh no.
But if it seems like things are going well and that it could move beyond dinner, then it's sort of like, well, hey, here's what we're interested in. Here's what we're not interested in. Here's when we were tested. Here's what came back, and we put all this information out there, and that sort of leaves it open then for the other people to give that information back to you.
Yeah. And
start that conversation and negotiation around what you want to do, how you want to do it. And
that can be a great filter too, I guess, or kind of vetting for people as well. So if we put all this information out there about us and we ask for that in return, if people are unwilling to talk about things or unwilling to have that conversation, that tells us a lot about that person or those people.
Mm-hmm.
And generally we wouldn't want to take it further at that point.
And a real quick clarification there. Sometimes when people are super new to this, they've never had that conversation. And so for us to say like, if you aren't prepared to have that conversation, we don't even want to go near you. That's not even it. It's more like if we bring this up and people are like, oh yeah, and they just sort of, they're dodging it for the sake of like, they just don't want to talk about it. That's a totally different thing than like, oh, well, I've never thought about that. Is this a conversation people have? Like, and then it's a learning moment. Then it's, let's teach somebody how to have this conversation.
And I imagine there must be a lot of that depending on where people are at in their journey when you meet them and you're able to say, hey, this is, these are our best practices. Here's some advice. We can help you do this.
Yep, absolutely. And that's a totally different set of people than the people who are maybe trying to avoid it because they just don't want to talk about it. It's not sexy. We don't like to talk about that stuff, That's a different ball game than well, we've just never had this conversation, but this is super awesome. We need to think about it a little bit and get back to you. Then okay, then let's do that rather than power on when you're not comfortable or we're not comfortable.
What does trust mean to you? It's something that I've been wrestling a lot in my life as I've been dating and coming out of an old relationship. And I wonder if you guys, I assume you've had to think about this and to what degree trust is honesty or trust is an internal feeling that you have or kind of an acceptance. Have you thought about like what trust means in the context of non-monogamy and your relationship?
I think for me, it goes back to the piece like Finn said earlier of internalizing that your partner or the people in your life that care most about you always have your best interests in mind, and really internalizing that and moving forward through life knowing that, because that really, to me at least, is where that trust is. And also the other key thing is, both Finn and I are every single day making the choice to be in the relationship that we're in. It's like, sure that we are married, but even if you're not, or if you've been married 30 years, every day you wake up, you're making that choice to be in that relationship. And so knowing that each of us are making that choice to move forward because we want to, because neither one of us are stuck here. We could always leave or figure out a different scenario. Like that, to me, that's a huge component of trust as well, because I'm trusting him to always have my best interest in mind, but he's demonstrating it to me by choosing to be in this relationship, and not only just choosing, but fostering this relationship and putting energy and time and communication and respect, all of that into our relationship. So if there's pieces of that start to disappear or start to, not be there as when they need to be, then that's a conversation that we need to have and to work out, okay, we're at this point, either something needs to change or we need to change. And we've had that conversation. I mean, throughout 14 years of being together, that does come up sometimes, and we course correct, and ultimately we both still choose to be here.
Yeah, I'd agree with that completely. The other sort of side of the coin on the trust is we have to sort of trust other people. And obviously we don't have 14 or 20 years of history with other people, and we kind of have to develop a level of trust pretty quickly. One of the ways that I've found, or that we've found to be very useful in doing that is, and the thing that I think we're most concerned about is trusting that people want to be there. And for us, it's important that people want to be there, right? We don't want people interacting with us that are there because they don't feel comfortable leaving the situation, even though they wish they could leave. So something that we've really worked to do is to make sure people know and give them an out. Be like, hey, we'd be interested in doing this. Please feel free to say no. We're happy to, call it a night, or we're happy to just hang out and have a drink, or we try to give people that sort of invite the no from them, like, and make sure they know it's a safe place to say, yeah, no, we're not interested in doing that. And we're not going to like flip out and go crazy and make them feel like shit for it. So that's sort of one thing that we try to do, at least to make sure that we trust that people want to be there. Trusting that they're safe and that they're not going to harm us. On the other hand, that one is just sort of, you learn to read people, and it's just something you get better and better at and practice at. And I think realizing that the world is not a super scary place, and that 99.9% of people out there in the world, and I know, AJ, you've traveled a lot and you've met people all over the world as well, and that even in countries where people will warn you that everybody's out to get you, it's such a small percentage of people. And I think in the world of non-monogamy, it's the same way. Like, are there people out there who have, maybe tested positive for something and are hiding that and being deceitful? Yeah, that probably happens. But the number of people who are doing that is, first of all, infinitesimally small, especially compared to the number of people who potentially have an STI that have no idea that they have it, because so many of them have no symptoms, right? And so it's just the things that you're going to worry about it's people being malicious is the furthest thing, I think, from our minds. We're not really ever worried about our physical safety in this world.
One thing that's occurring to me is that, I did a poll on Instagram recently. I do these polls, and I asked if anyone had been betrayed, and most people said yes. And I think when you open up, or you are able to have these discussions about opening up, it really kind of demystifies or deflates the threat of betrayal. You say, every day I wake up and I say, yes, I want to be in this relationship. And I think part of that is very true, because you see that you have other opportunities. You have other relationship opportunities, other sexual opportunities, whereas someone in a monogamous relationship may not be as aware of that, and they may not be actively saying every morning, you know what, though? I choose my relationship. I choose my marriage. So there's a real power, it seems, that you have there.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because I do think there's a lot of people out there. I mean, in our society in general, monogamy is assumed, right? That's what is assumed. And so there's many people that go through life that don't ever know that there is another option. And even if you never acted on it, I think that's absolutely okay as well. It's knowing that there are options and that you have a choice that I think is the important part. And having those conversations with your partner can change your relationship, hopefully for the better. Because like I said, even if you never act on those, you're at least aware that you are making that choice.
Yeah, you are making a choice, as opposed to the pressure and shame of societal norms making that choice for you.
Right.
Yeah. I will also say that there is a flip side to this, in that there's times where you meet people and you get back home and you're like, I am so glad I'm with you and not them. And so, and that's not necessarily to be mean, but just like
preferences.
Yeah, preferences, or somebody who's like, maybe in a physical sense, like everything that you've ever dreamed of, whatever that means. But like when you sort of start to unwrap that maybe it's not a great fit, and you're like, okay, well, there's more to it. There's so much more to our relationship than just what you look like, or just who you are. Like, there's this total package, and there's this history, and there's all of these things that, you can meet somebody and look at their pictures online and be like, yeah, I definitely want that. And then you're sitting at dinner and you're like, I definitely don't want this anymore. And so that's sort of powerful as well. It really helps you clarify why am I with this person, and why do I want to be here every day?
Right. And the other piece, like thinking a little bit about like the word betrayal, like you said, there's still the chance to feel betrayed in an open relationship. The key is being ethical, right? To act in your partner's and your best interest. And some couples want to share everything, and that's what is important. Other couples have rules that are, don't ask, don't tell type rules. And that's what works for them. So when you think of being ethical, it kind of means telling everything. But if your agreement is not to tell everything, then being ethical is to still act in a way that keeps your partner and you safe, but also you're not talking about it. So if either one of those, whatever your relationship agreement is broken, of course there's going to be feelings of betrayal. And the other point I wanted to make is that, non-monogamy is definitely not for everybody, and it doesn't always work. And some people will start trying to be non-monogamous in one relationship, and it does not work. And then they're later on in their life, they're in another relationship, and it works really well. So I think it's not the end all be all. This is how you must do it for your life because this is what works. It's all about the learning process and communication and being respectful and ethical in your relationships and getting back to knowing that you do have that choice.
Mm-hmm. And we've kind of touched on this now, this idea of shame. And that's obviously something that I'd love to delve into now. I know that Emma and Finn are not your real names. So I'm curious, how out are you about this with your friends, with your family, and why or why not?
So this is something that we're actually kind of in the middle of going through. We've started to tell some of our closest friends.
For many years, we didn't tell anybody because it was between us and that's what we wanted it to be.
Well, it was mostly just our sex life.
Right.
Right.
It's nobody's business, really.
Right.
Exactly.
But now we're at a point where we want to share it more, and we're in that process. But there is a lot of shame around it because it's not the societal norm, right?
Well, and you're afraid you're going to be judged, and that people are going to look at this and they're going to jump to conclusions of, well, you're not being safe, your relationship isn't secure, and all of these things that we can point to 14 years of history and say, well, we're still here and we're doing great. And there's people who have tried to be monogamous together and have failed much more quickly than we obviously have. We haven't failed yet. And so, it's sort of one of those, pinning down the shame around it is difficult. It's, what are we ashamed of? Are we ashamed that we're just doing something that's different than everybody else? Is it because it's sex? I don't know. I think the reason we kept it from people was because it was sex, and we don't typically talk about our sex lives, especially, I guess, once you're married, right? Everybody just starts assuming like, well, they're married and they have sex together and that's what they do. We don't need to talk about it. It's not like when you have a group of single people get together at the bar and they're talking about the people they're dating and who they're hooking up with, and that, like, all of those things go out the window, and now it's just this assumed monogamy. And I don't know. I think it makes other people uncomfortable. And maybe that's just us projecting. And I think for me,
I think it's the fear that it might make somebody uncomfortable.
Right. And we're typically the type of people who don't want to make other people uncomfortable. So I don't know if it's shame so much as it is like, I just don't want to make you feel uncomfortable, so I'm just not going to tell you about it. But if someone started asking me about it, I would tell them. Yeah,
I think over the years, I know that I have held a lot of shame about it mostly because it deals with sex, and in society, you're not really supposed to want that, right? You're not supposed to not supposed to talk about sex. You're not supposed to, want variety or whatever. But yet it's still a natural human emotion and need and thing that happen that you want in your life. And so I go back and forth a lot about wanting to talk more about it or just wanting to keep it to myself. I go back and forth with that a lot. But as I've gotten older, I want to talk more about it because I want other people to understand that it is an option and that it does exist and that you can have those conversations. So we're in the middle of being a little more open about who we are with people. And it's a process.
Yeah, but I will say the people that we've told have been super supportive about it. And now we're able to have conversations with them that we haven't had before. And we don't have to hide things, from like some of our best friends. We were always making up, not necessarily lies, but it's like, oh, well, we're going out of town this weekend. Or we're hanging out with these other people, and then it's like, well, why don't you want to hang out with us? And it's sort of like, well, I do want to hang out with you, but it sort of has demystified, a 10-year chunk of our relationship that was sort of in the shadows of like, oh, well, they're going on vacation again, or they're going and doing this again, or why weren't we invited to that, or why weren't we involved in this? And I think, ultimately we started feeling really bad about. Like we're lying to some of the people who are closest to us.
It's a burden.
It is, and it's
unnecessary.
Yeah, and for us, it hasn't just been the sex piece. And so it's, having to barbecue with friends and they weren't there because they weren't part of that group of friends. But now that doesn't have to be that way because we've sort of told them about it and they were supportive about it. And they are interested in meeting these people and they...
Well, and I think the key is too, like, even if it is just about the sex, that's okay.
Yeah.
Like that's okay. And that's what we need to get comfortable with starting to talk about, because there shouldn't be shame around that, especially like if you're doing it in an ethical way and respectful where no one's getting hurt and everyone's on board and there's all of the consent that you need and all of those things, then there's nothing wrong with it. And getting that through my head and other people's heads,
apparently mine
and apparently yours, can be hard. And the other point I wanted to mention too is that it has been a little bit scary to tell some of our friends, because we also don't want them to feel like we, lied to them, which we did somewhat.
Yeah.
But also we don't want them to feel like we're hitting on them either.
Or judging them for not being non-monogamous.
Yes. So it's just navigating that conversation when you do tell them, because ultimately, I think being honest and open about it is important, especially with the people closest in your life. I mean, the other piece is that, unfortunately, if you're open about it too much, depending what you do for a living and where you live, it could definitely impact your career. And that's sad and unfortunate, but it is the way it is. So I don't blame anybody for ever being discreet about it. I think that's totally okay as long as everyone's on board and no one's being harmed. But I also think there's a lot of people, if you have the ability to be more open about it, I think it's really important to be open about it, because then it's just more and more people learn about it and it becomes hopefully someday something that's not as shameful to talk about.
Exactly. I mean, you've touched on the fact that shame is a kind of communal emotion. And the more you talk about the things you're ashamed of, the more you're actually helping everyone feel less shame about it. That's, one of the best antidotes to shame is just to talk about it.
Right.
So I think that you are doing a service to everyone, even though it's uncomfortable, even though some people might judge you. You are actually doing a service, I think, when you talk about it, though it's difficult and it is risky.
Yeah.
Have you ever considered, would you ever tell your extended family?
Yes, we have. And our goal is...
We have not. You said yes, we have.
We have considered.
Oh. So yes, we have considered it. We have not done it yet.
Okay.
I think we will.
And we're in an easier position to do so. Something I mentioned earlier, right, is we can kind of look to this history we have and say...
Right.
You had no idea that this was what was happening for the last 10, 12, 13 years of our relationship. And now nothing needs to change.
The proof is in the pudding, as they say.
Exactly. And so it's just something that I think it's going to be awkward and we just don't want to do it. And so we just haven't done it yet. We were testing it out on our friends and that succeeded. And so now the next step is, telling our families.
Yeah. And I think the other piece is telling friends or family, if you tell somebody and they react negatively, please, at least if it were me, if I told someone and they reacted negatively, I would give them space and time and also probably a few resources so that they could learn a little bit more. If they continue to be shitty to you, then that tells you a lot about them.
Yeah.
Well, that relationship was sort of built on false pretenses and that they only liked you because of who they thought you were.
And it's important to remember that, and this is my belief, that the way people shame us is always with their own shame.
Yes.
So it's really more about them and their upbringing and their kind of culture and beliefs than it is about you.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. It's still scary, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, even though you know that and you can reason with that, it's still a scary thing to do.
Yeah, anytime we lose an important connection, it's going to hurt, even if it's their fault.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think we're coming to the end here. Why don't you tell the listeners about your own podcast?
I mean, well, first of all, thank you, AJ, for having us on and for giving us a platform to talk about this, because it's something we enjoy talking about and sharing. So, again, thank you.
Thank you.
And we have our own podcast. It's called Normalizing Non-Monogamy, and it's a weekly show where we interview people who have been or are exploring non-monogamy in some capacity. So we have people who have been doing it for 30 years. We also have people who are brand new and haven't ever even met anybody else. They're just having those conversations. So we try to bring on as diverse of a group of people as we possibly can, people in all different relationship styles, and that's the goal.
So the way the show works is every week we interview these people, whether it's a couple or a solo person.
We haven't done a triad, but we would.
We haven't. And we just kind of let them tell their story and give them a platform to share what it looks like for them. And we've got 80, 90 some episodes out right now, and we're going strong and having a great time with it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I mean, I really think that it's a topic that meshes with shame so closely and really challenges a lot of assumptions that we have about how you have to be, just like you said, to learn that there are other options, even if you don't take them, is really powerful. So I think you guys are doing such important work, and I am excited to listen to more of your podcast. And I thank you so much for opening up with me about these really uncomfortable topics.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Thanks for doing what you do as well.
Thank you so much. Welcome back.
Well, we never left.
We did never leave. But thank you everyone for listening to this whole episode, I guess. And thank you so much to AJ for taking the time to interview us and being willing to let us publish this episode on our channel.
Yeah, and again, if you want to find out more about us, more about the show, and anything that we're working on and doing, the best place to find that information is on our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com, or also on Twitter and Instagram. We're not super active, but
we have screen names under NNM Podcast.
Yeah, and if you want to reach out to us, if you want to say hello, please do. We respond to every single email, usually within a day or so, and we look forward to hearing from you and interviewing you.
Yeah. And now go enjoy all of these episodes you have to listen to.
Bye. Should we say goodbye?
Bye, everyone.